Hey, welcome back to the only sports channel that puts zero effort into it. No lights, just what's up on the ceiling. No camera, just what's on my phone. Uh, the divisional rounds just wrapped up. I digging myself out of snow this morning and last night during halftime. It's everyone. I guarantee everyone's talking about Lamar Jackson and the whole clickbaity of like, is Lamar a bust? Is Lamar choking? But I don't want to talk about that. And I don't think he is a bust. I don't think he does choke. Only one team can win the game. I want to talk about something that's going to be coming up in here in about 2 weeks, right before the Super Bowl, and that's the MVP. So the MVP race, to me, this is one of the best MVP races we've had in a long time, at least that I can remember. Last year, the MVP race, it was terrible. It was down to four people, maybe. I mean, and I think some people thought the fourth guy was a fraud. I don't know. Last year, the MVP race was pretty much, Lamar won it, and then it was Christian McCaffrey, Dak, and Brock Purdy. In my opinion, last year it should have been Dak. I know everyone's like turning off the video if they accidentally clicked on it now. If you haven't already turned it off, because I mean, why would you be watching this? Why? But yeah. So it should have been Dak or Christian over Lamar, and then you could throw Brock Purdy in there. That's my opinion. I Lamar's stats weren't that great last year. I felt like they gave it to him because he was on the best team and he was a quarterback. He did have great rushing like he always does, but his passing stats were mediocre at best. I mean, I think it was 24 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. It was very Tyrod Taylor, just kind of good but not great. So gave it to him because there was no other options. So but this year, stacked with options. So I'm going to get started. I'm going to have two honorable mentions. I'm going to do a top five, but two honorable mentions, and that's simply because there's an unwritten rule that if your team doesn't make the playoffs, you don't win the MVP. Just how it is. So my two honorable mentions: number one, Ja'Marr Chase. Number two is Joe Burrow. Ja'Marr Chase, amazing season, just great. Like that was kind of my bust in fantasy this year because he held out. I was worried about him missing games, not necessarily from the holdout, but being tweaking a hamstring or something like that. So I avoided him first round of all my fantasy drafts. Didn't work. I mean, I made the playoffs, but I didn't win any of the leagues. But Ja'Marr Chase, man, what a dude that guy was this year. He was amazing. And then I don't feel we give position players enough credit in wins. We always go quarterback, especially MVP. It's always quarterback. And I get a little tired of it because, Ja'Marr Chase is good, as good as Joe Burrow is. Ja'Marr Chase helps Joe Burrow. Like, if you didn't have Ja'Marr Chase there, Joe Burrow wouldn't be putting up the stats he did. He'd still be putting up good stats. The same thing if you vice versa, but, the combination. Now, the other honorable mention, Joe Burrow. If the Bengals had gotten to the playoffs, he would have been my MVP. Just a great season, carrying just a terrible defense. That line is still very bad. Yes, he's got two great weapons and T. Higgins and Ja'Marr Chase, like I mentioned, and a guy that maybe I've been on him too long, but I love Mike Gesicki. I think used in the right way, Mike Gesicki could be a great slot tight end guy. That's a term I coined up, the slot tight. He doesn't block, but you get a 6'6" guy that can jump out of the gym and run. Like, why'd Miami try to use him as a blocker? Anyway, I'm getting out of the weeds. So Ja'Marr Chase would have been my MVP if he made the playoffs. Cincinnati didn't make the playoffs. Unfortunately, we got the train wreck that was Pittsburgh in there. If it's college football, we could have swapped them out, right? Right, Paul Feinbaum. But so those are my two honorable mentions. Number five, it is Jared Goff. And now everyone's going to scoff at this. You're going to scoff at the Goff. But he had a really good season. Now, normally, a lot of times, how they calculate the MVP is like, okay, who's the best team? Who was the quarterback? All right, MVP. It seems like that's what they do the vast majority of the time, or at least that they're in the discussion. Jared Goff, I don't think is going to the discussion. I think he'll probably end up around, like, voting wise, in the 4 through 8 range, just because some Midwest voters I think will put him up there. But And obviously this is just regular season. We all saw the playoff game where, he had a bunch of turnovers and struggled, but hey, it is what it is. I'm not sure if he was fully there. I know when they go to get the concussion test, like they're like, oh, they're cleared to go in. Are they really 100%? They're not a little foggy, because he did not play well after throwing that interception and getting just rocked and having to go get a medical analysis. But Jared Goff, break it down, regular season, he was like top 4 in every category. He was really good. He's being overlooked because he has Brock Purdy syndrome, which Brock Purdy syndrome is the national pundits and most national fans think you're a part of the system. That you take that person out of the system and they suck. And you could literally put anybody else in there. Like they talk about how you could put anybody else in there over Brock or Goff, and they would be just as successful, which isn't true. Like, that's why, if that was the case, Trey Lance would have been successful. Like Jimmy Garoppolo would have been as successful as Brock was. But I'm not here to argue that or this or that. But I'm just saying, Jared Goff, my number 5. He should get some consideration. I don't think he had that great of a season to win it. If he had those stats last year, I would have given him that last year. Number 4, Derrick Henry. So Derrick Henry, it astonishes me that people aren't talking about Derrick Henry as much as they should be. Great season, almost had 2,000 yards. Had about 16 touchdowns. It was just, once again, I don't do the lights. I don't do a camera. I also rarely do research. I'm just like what I see. But so he had 16 touchdowns rushing, I believe, tied with James Cook, who's not on this list. But he really improved that Ravens offense. He kicked that into overdrive. They went from being a very, very, very good offense, like top 5, 5 to 8, to being the number 1 offense this year. He was a big part of that. And if you take him off that team and you put, let's say, Justice Hill and Keaton Mitchell later, I think they do well in spots, but they wouldn't be the same offense. It wouldn't be opening up people. Lamar wouldn't have had the season he had, as they wouldn't worry about Justice Hill or Keaton Mitchell. No offense to those guys. I think they're solid players, but they're not Derrick Henry. They're not King Henry, where you have to watch that guy. You have to game plan for that guy. You've got to account for that. And he brought that offense up. Now, they were 11-0 when he rushed for more than 85 yards. And for the life of me, I don't understand why they didn't give him the ball more in the second half. Against Buffalo, they stymied him in the first half, but that second half, he was starting to go. And everyone knows with Derrick Henry, he's a freak of nature. Like, that dude is built different. I'm not sure if there's really been a running back like him, at least in the last 25 years. I mean, he's so big and so fast, and he can move, and his great vision. But, if they get pounding the ball, maybe that would have been different. But Derrick Henry is my number 4. Number 3 is if anybody clicked on this and they're still watching for some reason, which why would you, you've got to have something better to do, right? I mean, anything. Number 3 is Derrick Henry's teammate, Lamar Jackson. And I know everyone's putting him at 1 or 2. I have him at 3. And my main thing is MVP, most valuable. Yeah, that offense, if they didn't have Lamar, of course they wouldn't be making the playoffs, more than likely. But Derrick Henry's there too. Derrick Henry was, to me, almost just as vital as Lamar Jackson. Both guys, I have a hard time giving the award to MVP when you've got so many weapons and you run the ball so well, and you've got another like Hall of Famer right there. It's seemingly still in his prime. Like, I know Derrick Henry's like 32, but he didn't look like an old running back. So I feel the other two candidates did more for their team with less, and people might scoff at that when I reveal one of them, but whatever. What's watching this anyways. So Lamar Jackson's number 3, great season. My other thing is I have a hard time giving back-to-back MVPs. If Lamar didn't win last year, I'd probably have him at number 2, maybe number 1. It's hard to tell. All these guys had great seasons, but yeah, to win back to back, you have to win that second one, like be head and shoulders above the other guys. I don't think Lamar was that this year. There's like 9 candidates that could have won MVP in my eyes, but I'm sure people would argue and fight over that. So number 2, and I fought with myself. Like I actually switched these back and forth, and I had number 2, number 1 for the longest time. But number 2 is Saquon Barkley. Saquon Barkley, if the Giants didn't waste this guy, we would be talking about Saquon Barkley as a bona fide Hall of Famer already. He is a generational talent to me. Like you see what he did at Penn State, and then he came in and on a garbage Giant. All this Giants teams, like the offensive lines were always just terrible. You had Daniel Jones as your quarterback. Daniel Jones. Now, I hate being negative and just shitting on people and calling them they suck, but Daniel Jones is not a starting NFL caliber quarterback. He's not. I didn't understand the drafting because I watched him at Ole Miss and Duke. I'm sorry, Ole Miss. I'm thinking Eli Manning, but I watched him at Duke. He was not good. Now he's a great athlete. He can run more than people think, but he's not that good of a player. He's not that great. He's not a great quarterback. And everyone likes to make excuses. And this is where I argue about the quarterback versus his supporting cast. Everyone talked about Daniel Jones, about how they shouldn't have signed him after that 1 year he had where he only had like 15 touchdowns. He had 15 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. They won a playoff game against the Vikings, and they re-signed him for $40 million a year. $40 million. They should have let him walk. They should have let him walk and get somebody else because he was a replacement level quarterback. That $40 million, you could have very easily signed Tyrod Taylor, or Tayrod, I forget how he wants it pronounced now, whatever, for probably $10 million. And he would have given you the same results, if not maybe a little bit better. So why are you paying this guy $40 million when he can't be a quarterback? Now I'm getting in the weeds here, but what I'm saying is like they had zero support for Saquon. He was their offense, and teams knew he was their offense, and he still put up solid seasons. And I have him at 2. The reason I also had him at 1 before was maybe a little bit of bias because I get so sick of everyone devaluing running back. Bill Barnwell. I love Bill Barnwell. I think Bill Barnwell is a very entertaining, a very high quality analyst on ESPN. But he joins in the chorus of running backs don't matter. Running backs don't matter. You can just plug and play any running back. They don't make any difference. Like putting him in the MVP race is useless. Going back to Daniel Jones, if a quarterback doesn't have a solid support staff around him, they're gonna fail. I don't care how good they are. Like let's look at Mahomes this year. Put up average, somewhat stats, and everyone says he's the best quarterback in the world. People talk about he's the best quarterback ever already, and I was like, his offensive line is good if not great. They're good. His skill position players though are at this point kind of average on the decline. I know everyone's gonna say, what about Travis Kelce? Kelce's what, 36, 37? He's on the downside of his career. The wide receivers are older and inexperienced, and that's what I'm just saying. It's like you could have the best quarterback. That's supposedly the best quarterback ever, and yet he just puts up middling stats and the Chiefs win because he can still pull it out, and the defense is good. The defense is probably the best in the league, so that's how they win. So we shouldn't talk about running backs or wide receivers or tight ends or defensive players as the MVP it's just absolutely ridiculous to me. It's stupid. It's a stupid argument that we keep pushing that the NFL is strictly quarterbacks are the bad. Like the quarterbacks get all the credit and none the blame, according to some of these guys, some of these talking heads. But so Saquon's number 2. He would have broke Eric Dickerson's rushing record if they let him. I felt they should have, and I think he was pulled from a couple games early too. And I know a lot of people was like, well, he's 17 games or 16. I was like, yeah, okay, well then you got to give OJ the rushing record because he did it in 14. The whole arguing is, well, I guess, that's why the other end of sports is we argue about stupid shit because, you cheer for a color anyways. Like, oh, I like blue. Oh, I like red. So that's what we do in sports. But he would have broke the single season rushing record. he would have had probably 20 touchdowns if Jalen Hurts didn't push his way to about 15. Jalen Hurts had 15 rushing touchdowns, like from within. So I'm sorry. Okay, now not all of them were from the 5 yard line, but I think he got 12 of them from the 5 yard in. So if you even just give 6 of those to Saquon, he almost hits 20 touchdowns. Like, Saquon has been the most. He's had a great season, one of the best ever, and yet nobody talks about him MVP because we have to talk about quarterbacks. And here I am falling into that same trap of he should be the MVP, especially obviously regular season again, playoffs don't count. But if they didn't have Saquon Barkley, and Eagles fans, if there's somehow the odds of an Eagles fan watching this, you would admit that if you didn't have Saquon Barkley in the divisional round, you would be at home right now. It'd be Rams Commanders. That's who. Saquon Barkley was the offense last night in Philadelphia. And Jalen Hurts was compromised with his knee. So we'll see what's going on with that. But Jalen is still very good. And I know people are like, well, you dinged Lamar for having Derrick Henry, and Saquon's got Jalen Hurts, and he's got Devontae Smith, and he's got A.J. Brown. He's got a very good offensive line. Yes, all that's true. But somebody's got to win the award, and it's not going to be the worst, a good guy off the worst team. But Saquon to me, number 2, that's who I'd put there, and number 1 is Josh Allen. And the reason I have Josh Allen there is his passing stats aren't that are solid, but his rushing and how he's the opposite of Saquon and Lamar. He doesn't have much help. His offensive line is, once again, a solid offensive line. I don't think he'd be successful in the NFL with a bad offensive line. But so he has a good solid offensive line, but his skill position players are either young or they are just average guys, just replacement level players. Curtis Samuel, Keon Coleman, who's a rookie. Dalton Kincaid was hurt, missed a lot of the season, I believe. I know he missed games, but I wasn't exactly for what. I think he was hurt late at the end. Dawson Knox, who steps in, is slightly above average tight end. You've got Khalil Shakir, who's solid, but are they better than if you put those guys on any other team, are they starting? Is Curtis Samuel, who's out there now, he doesn't make up big stats, but he's out there. Is Keon Coleman starting? Or they didn't get as much playing time as every other team? Josh Allen, this year, he pretty much carried the Bills' offense, especially early when the Bills had a lot of defensive players out. Early in the season, mid-season, until they started coming back, like Matt Milano came back. But Josh Allen, I feel, deserves MVP this year. Such a close race. I wouldn't have a problem if any of those guys won. I wouldn't even have a problem if they gave it to Joe Burrow or Jamar Chase. They're not going to. But great season for the NFL. These guys all did great. Historical seasons. But you got to give it to one guy. And I might be biased because Josh hasn't won it yet. And I felt he carried the Bills more than Saquon carried the Eagles and more than Lamar carried Baltimore. But that's obviously my opinion. It means nothing, just as much as the opinions of everyone else means nothing. The only difference is they get paid to say it, and I don't. But hey, so comment, tell me who you think is the MVP. Don't share. Why would you do that? So let me know in the comments who your MVP would be. I'm pretty sure I will get most comments MVP would be like Hugh Morris or Hugh Jazz. I don't even know the joke anymore. But yeah, sorry, long night, shoveling, watching football early in the morning. But hey, have a great Monday. It's Martin Luther King Day. Hope you have off for the holiday.